Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to be making this particular vise here that actually has a wooden piece that turns to clamp the saw in place. So I designed this build using already pre-dimensioned timber, in this case pine, from the hardware store. The only addition is you're going to need some sort of a hardwood dowel, because that's going to join the two pieces together and it's going to have a lot of flexing tension when you actually tension it up. So I didn't want to go pine. You might be able to get away with pine, but I already had this Tasmanian oak dowel and so that's what I went with. So we'll talk about that when we actually get to that stage. Because of the way I've done this, I was going to get, or wanted around about 40mm just to give quite a bit of strength to the whole unit. Because, you know, we're doing some heavy work on the top of it with sharpening, and so a lot of flex and twist and stuff. So I wanted it at 40mm, and so I've gone ahead with two pieces of 90mm. I couldn't get anything that thick that was reasonably priced. So we're going to do a laminated construction, meaning that we don't actually have to cut any of our half-lap joinery to join it onto the jaws that we have up here or our cross braces. So it does mean the barrier for entry on this is quite low, but if you do have thicker material, you can 100% just cut some little half-lap for that. So what I've done is I've just set them up on these clamps, because what we're going to do is I'm going to clamp them all together in one big go, just so we've got it right. Now, the one thing we need to make sure is that on one side of it, that offsets enough to give us our spacing. And so it's spaced off one of these cross braces here. So if you sit that in there, flush it with your finger here, that's your alignment, that's where your glue needs to go. So in order to do this, you're best just to leave yourself enough gap, and I know the sticker's here, I'm just going to leave that there, it doesn't really matter. And so I'm just going to turn one side up, because quite often we end up with too much glue when we do glue ups. You see a lot of these YouTubers and they just use way too much glue. There's no reason to use a whole ton of glue. I'm just going to be a little bit low tech here and just use our finger and a piece of paper towel to keep ourselves clean. And so we're going to do that. And we can actually set this off to the side, which is what we're going to do now, because we're going to work on our detailing here on the outside. So I've got the jaws here. I've actually just got a little mark on the top. We will hand plane this a little bit, but if you need to face plane them, you can before doing this, because I just wanted it to come in to fit the tightest, and this was a very tight fit, so I didn't need to actually adjust anything. If your timber is warped and things like that, which is possible, try and get the straightest possible for this particular part, because otherwise you're going to have to do quite a bit of face planing if you need to. Now, in this case, I didn't want to face plane these because they fitted tight. If I had to face plane them to make them fit, I would. Otherwise, I prefer the slightly rough finish that they have off the machinery, because that just assists in gripping your saw blade. So I just went ahead and made this little angle, so when I come back here I know that that's the top that I wanted. Now, these pieces are 600mm long, and they are 65mm wide. We're going to be coming up here 40mm when we attach them, which is roughly the width of these cross pieces. So these cross stretches are going to be 400. So we know we're going to take a swath of 400 out of the middle here, which means we're going to have 100mm on either side, and that is what we're going to be doing our detail to allow the handle to fit. Which means on each side we need to come in 100mm. When it comes to this, the marks we want are 100mm and this 10mm, and I'm going to show you how we're going to put the curve on there. What you want to do is get something with a curve that's going to span that distance. If you've got a little bow where you bend them to actually make the shapes, you can go ahead and use that. You can flex a small piece of wood and a clamp to get an arc, but for a short arc like this, I actually use, this is a large can, this is a 4-litre can, and the arc on this happens to be absolutely perfect to mark that angle. So what we're going to do is line this up on here and mark it off that. We come in and I rest it on this side here, right on the convergence, and then I mark it around here, and at the last second I kind of just straighten it out to where that line already is. It's like that. We've got our marks here and here. Now We obviously want to keep them the same, and we want to keep these together while we do that. And I know you see on YouTube a lot of super glue, blue tape and stuff like that to keep things together. And while you could do that, and you could use something like double-sided tape. Now, when I made my other one, I actually did use double-sided tape, and the double-sided tape I've got does not want to let go. So what I decided to do in the end was I just bring them together like this, and I just clamp them together in my vise, just making sure to line them up once they're clamped in the vise. So what I'm going to do is throw them in the vise, and we're going to grab our coping saw to cut this gap out. So the most important part here is to ensure that these lines are squared across and giving you a bit of a reference when you cut. So I'm going to put a square here and a square line here. So I'm going to start by sawing across here. Now, see how they're coming apart a little bit? You want them to stay as close together as possible. And I've got this set up a little bit higher than I normally would. And so I'm just going to bring an F-clamp in underneath, and that'll stop them pulling apart. And the arc just ends here, so I'm keeping it away. So I just square this across, and I'm going to try and stay as close to the line without actually going over it. The reason being is, the more material you leave here, the harder it is to actually clean up. We can use a nice, sharp, wide chisel for this. The only other thing that I went ahead and did there was just use the sandpaper just to take off these sharp edges, just so they don't want to split, because we don't really want that happening. Now, what we have to do is get our structures that were down there been drying. It's probably been about 20 minutes, half hour, so we need to clean them up, and then we can attach them onto our jaw. This is going to be our main fixed side. I made sure to make sure that this was the outside piece here that we're gluing it onto. Now we can see that everything came up a little bit short down here, but that doesn't really matter. Our measurements were off this top edge. That's what really counts. Now, these have come a little longer into here than I expected, but you could cut these off if you wanted to. Doesn't really matter. None of this really matters for this particular build. So what I'm going to do is we'll grab some glue, and we're going to glue these stretches in here, and then we're actually going to glue and we're going to screw them together. Free drill these while it's held in the right spot. And I'm purposely putting the top screw here as part of our decoration, and then down the bottom I'm going to do the opposite. Now, since this is pine, these are, they're not going to need to be countersunk. It's up to you if you want to countersink them, but you really don't need to. So now we're going to take some care to actually glue these, but first, so we can line it back up with those holes, before I put the glue on, I'm going to push these screws through so they just poke through the hole, and then we can use the tip of the screw to line it up with the hole after we put the glue on. And that's a good little tip just for aligning them. Just a little bit there. We don't want it to squeeze out much on this, and just a little bit on that end grain there. Just here, and I'm just going to, once they're aligned, I'm just going to put one in. align the ones at the other end. Now, before I do these up, to ensure this whole lot's brought together nice and tight in this direction against those shoulders, I'm just going to... Oop, I'm just going to put a little bit of tension there, and that's just ensuring that it's all pushed this way. And because this is pine, there's still a little bit of movement within those screws. And then we go ahead and do them up. So when it comes to the short stretcher here, we have to deal with our little twisty bit here. So we need to actually cut that, drill these holes, and fit that before we glue the entire structure together, because it's held within the structure. So you can see that was already at our 400, and so we need to get these shoulder lines. So I'm going to use a pencil here and mark those shoulder lines. I believe the camera just went out there for a moment, so what I've done is I put my dowel into this back corner, as close as I can get it, draw a circle around it, flipped it end on end, did the other side, drew another circle. Now we've got to cut down to these base lines and actually cut an area out so we get a circular piece here. So it's all our waste. We know that this is what we want to keep here. So we want to keep that circular area nice and clean. So I'm going to grab a back saw, and I'm going to go roughly here. Now I'm just doing these little shallow curves just so I know where I'm going with this. So now we can cut these down to that baseline. Try and get it even. So now that we've done that, before we refine the rest of that, we need to cut these base lines and not go through too far. Remember, all this has to do is turn, so it doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be a deadbolt right circle. As close as you can get it, it'll still work, it'll still spin, I promise you. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we need to see where this is going to sit. So if we have it sitting about midway, we can see when it rotates that it's going to come over onto that side, which is what we want. I've come up and the center of that hole is about 90 millimeters up. So what we're going to do is take both of these, come 90 up, and that's where we're going to auger the holes. So this is a 3/4 Irwin style auger bit. And you kind of sit it here, use your finger as a rest, and sit the wings there, and that's how you kind of size them, kind of like that, and this is the right size. So now that we've got the correct size, we have to put it into our auger. And now we're going to make those marks on there, line them up, and auger them. So I have seen various techniques with using rings and stuff. I don't have a ring, so I'm not worrying about that. What you want to do is get it upright so you can look along it like this. And that's going to keep you as straight as you can, because you're looking this way. You can see side to side, and roughly straight is going to be relatively easy to judge over this distance by sighting it. So let's get those pieces in here so we can auger our holes. So we're going to start that here, and you can see I'm lining up. I'm trying to get deadbolt straight this way, and I'm pretty sure just because of where I'm sitting, this line, it just feels right. And wherever this happens to sit, you just want to push your body up against that handle, and we'll slowly turn it. See that it hits square. If it hits the wood square at the exact same moment, you're likely got your auger square as well. Now we're going to turn it, and we're going to effortlessly go through this pine. Now, you don't want to just go smashing all the way through. You want to keep feeling for that thread to just poke through on this side here. So we can see just here, it's just, I'm going to turn it once more. Now we want to back that off. We want to turn this piece around. We want to line up exactly how we were on it before. Let me try and do it from the side here, just so you guys can see it. So there's the hole. So now we want to come in, line that up, keep ourselves as square as we could before, and then spin it around. I can't turn it here because of the bench, but I just wanted to show you that. Spin it in there, and it should just guide straight back in. And now we achieved a nice, relatively straight hole, straighter than on my my mock-up. And it's clean on both sides because we scored both sides because we brought the auger in from the other side. So now we can actually bring this whole thing together. So first thing we have to do is get that fitted in there. Now you need to rotate this so you can bring the rest of it together, and you need to make sure that this is going to sit out. So you can see it's not quite sitting square with those in there, which means that one of our holes is off. So what we're going to do is pre-drill this once again. If I found my drill bit. So I actually had this happen when I did it last time. So what you want to do is actually get these ones attached down here first. And because this stretches on the inside, I'm obviously going to drill this one from the inside. So I'm going to make sure this one's fully lined up here. Now I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. Because we want to bring the whole lot together, I still want to glue it and screw it. So before I move on, I'm still going to get those two screws in there like this. Sure, we're going to line up. I'm just going to put the glue on the opposite side here. Line them up. Now this is going to brace the rest of it so it sits square. So we're going to put some tension over on this one to bring this one together over here. So I've already screwed that in, so I'm just going to run the glue in here, which I should have done before I did that. I just stuffed up again. Hold it with your hands. You can use an F-clamp if you wanted to try and pull it together. But I'm doing this in the reverse order to the last one screw at a time, as you can see here. And this way, so now comes a little bit of a complicated part, is these dowels here and joining the whole lot together. So this dowel that runs here is what holds these two pieces together, but it also flexes to allow the tension to be applied up here, so it's rotating off the dowel. And so we've got this all in alignment. So now we need to work out where that dowel goes. I'm going to take my measurement off there that I already used, and we're going to put a dowel, trying to keep it straight, running through both pieces together. So I've marked down here. I took the measurement off the bottom of the jaw because that was the most accurate positioning that I could use. Tried to get them the same on both sides. I can't really square off the outside, so I've just squared across on each individual piece, putting upright, and that's where we're going to run our auger hole all the way through. Auger bit right where we want it. Line up however this works for us, and then the wings sit about the same, which means we're mostly square. Now we're going to have to go quite a bit further before we have to worry about it sticking out the other end this time. I think I heard it just move into the second arm just then. I like to oversize the dowels for this. First thing is you want to push the dowel through, and just so you got a little bit of play and movement in it, I've come about, let's say about 10 mil over this side. Now you can use a flush trim saw, flush cut saw. I'm just going to use a tenon saw here. So we're cutting just off the work so we don't get it, and then you want to push this so it sits flush on the large side, not the small side. You can see we've got it sticking out on the small side. We do not want to glue this dowel in. I'm never gluing this dowel in. What we're going to do is hold it with a screw on this side and a screw on the other side once we've adjusted where our twist goes and where it's actually going to hold. So I'm going to eyeball it like this. Right in the middle. Same with this side. Eyeball it. Maybe a little bit off center, just so you don't end up splitting your piece of wood apart where it's glued. And then, so we don't over torque this, clip it into low speed mode. Countersunk all the way in there. Same on this side. And now the dowel on that side is fixed in place. So before we do any more, we need to actually get the blocks that this is going to push against. we look at this one here, I just screwed a little couple of thin blocks in there, so we're going to do the same. And I'm actually just going to set it back from the edge like I did on the other one, about 5 millimeters, and then we can just put the screws straight in. So to ensure you get the same alignment on this side with this side, you want to rotate this forward. Make sure this is held together tight. Rotate it so it just touches that first block you put on. And so when you come and put this second block on, you can get the alignment the same. And you know when you apply the pressure here, it's going to apply it evenly across both sides. One consideration you have to make is if your handle of your saw is not going to fit, and before you put it together you might need to actually notch some out. In this case it doesn't really bother me for the saws I'm using, but if it is a problem for you, you might have to notch out part of this upright to allow the handle to enter. Now price the ruler out, do the same to the other side. And if you ever need to take this apart, you take that screw out, tap the dowel, and this small side will come off, and then you can actually access these faces to adjust them. So what we need to do is adjust this piece here, because currently that's not locking on. So what I want to do is turn it to my side. Hopefully you can see that. You want to grab a hand plane and just add flat chamfer along that edge on the corner. And it's still not touching, so we need to do more. So before we go ahead and just add a couple of chamfers to the top here and just take some of these arises off here, or you could leave it this way. I will put a chamfer up on this top edge. But first, we need to see if this is working. So I'm going to grab a full-size panel saw, any panel saw, it's just whatever I had in reach. So you can see, because you've spaced it, it's actually already tight to start with. So I'm going to lock that down here, and now I can't actually move that. Let's bring a file in. You can hear that the sound is nice, which means that it's locked in there really well. If you do need to adjust it to and fro, you can move the blocks around a little bit and just adjust it, because you can see it does still move slightly, and that's the beauty of having that outer jaw. If you need to adjust one side out further than the other, you can actually just rock it out ever so slightly and put that screw back in the short jaw so it actually clamps in square. But for me, this is actually working fairly well, but you do know that you can adjust how far the gap is and a little bit just to make sure it locks. I did just want to show you, if you want to bring a tenon saw into this, you can't, because it's going to hit everything here. I designed this for panel saws. If you want to design this for your tenon saws, you'll have to actually route a gap out for the back of it to go in. This didn't bother me too much because it's only hanging off a little bit and there's not really enough movement in it for me to worry about that. But you can see down here the handle is actually hitting, and so you just have to thin half that material out just so it can all slide in, and that's up to you depending on what you want to use your vise for. Now, I'm actually not going to do that on this. All you would have to do is mark it with your marking gauge and just saw it out and then chisel it out, maybe bring a router plane in and clean it up. But that's all you would have to do, just enough to allow that to go in there if you wanted to use it as a one-size-fits-all vise. So I'm just going to use a file. You can see that it's still splintering a little bit. Just the nature of pine. So we do that, follow it up with a little bit of a sand. So there you have it, folks. That's how you make this style of saw vise. I'm not even really sure what you call this style of saw vise. So I'm going to call it a woodlock saw vise or something like that. I'm really not sure what we call it. So maybe sound off in the comments below so we can come up with some idea of what this is actually called. I'll do another Google on the larger style to see if I can get the correct name for this style and put that in the title. Otherwise, I'm probably going to go with twisty woodlock saw vise or self-clamping saw vise, something like that. So if you like this video, please do like and subscribe down below. I know this was a little bit of a longer video. It just has, although not a lot of complexity, just a lot of different detailed steps that you have to take in order to get it to where it is and for it to work properly. And that's all about woodworking, isn't it? Learning the steps, learning out all the small little pieces that go together to make something work. Speaking of that, if you want to see another video such as this, do check out the video up here where we made the cheap, inexpensive Lee Nielsen style saw vise. Bye for now.